This afternoon, we have the pleasure to invite a distinguished speaker, Mr. Luca Bernardinetti of Mahanakorn Partners Group, a company specialized in legal and taxation affairs in Thailand and Southeast Asia. And Mr. Luca is also board of director of the Thai Italian Chamber of Commerce, and his extensive background in finance on international level. This afternoon, Luca will give us an outlook and a presentation regarding some measure to alleviate the effects on COVID-19 on the Thai economies, but it can be useful also for those companies that works internationally. With no much further ado, I would like to leave now the stage, virtual stage, to Luca, that I would like to thank. So Luca, please, the stage is yours, and we start recording from now.
All right, thank you, Michele, for the kind introduction. Thank you to the TICC for organizing this and other praiseworthy webinars these days. And welcome to all of the webinar attendees today. So today, as Michele mentioned, we'll be elaborating on the measures which are taken by the government in Thailand to alleviate the effects of the COVID-19, specifically on the economy. So my presentation will cover some legislative and tax updates with initiatives taken by the public sector and some insights also from the private sector. All right, so short introduction to the Mahanakorn Partners Group, MPG in short, for those of you who are not yet familiar with our firm. So MPG is a professional services firm headquartered in Thailand with an ASEAN presence. We have offices also in Singapore, and we cover Hong Kong and mainland China as of last year. We have a global footprint, meaning that we work regardless of the jurisdiction in some instances for cross-border trade. And in September 2019, we celebrated the 20th anniversary of our firm, which was founded as Vimami Consulting, an English and German-speaking law firm, and was rebranded as MPG in 2016, further to a merger. So let us see what we do. We are, as mentioned, first and foremost a law firm, and we provide a rather large range of legal services as we employ lawyers from diverse backgrounds with different experience, each specialized in an area of practice. Here you can see on this slide a few of them. We have a large corporate services practice assisting SMEs as well as multinational enterprises with a business in Southeast Asia. We also employ tax attorneys, accountants, and auditors, providing a wide range of accounting and tax advisory services, including tax planning and transfer pricing. We provide management consulting services, including capital projects management. For those of you following us on social media, you may have seen some of our work. We assist companies with their finance requirements, whether for inbound or outbound investment. And we also assist with employment, visas, and work permit. We have a worldwide presence, whether with our own offices or partner offices covering Asia Pacific, Europe, and North America as of last year. And without further ado, I would like to start today's presentation, and here's the agenda. So before we start, I'd just like to make a caveat. This presentation of ours is not, nor does intend to be exhaustive of all the measures that the government has taken to curb the spread of the virus. As you're probably aware of, there are new initiatives which are taken almost on a daily basis. So we would have time to delve into each and every one of them during this 40 minutes webinar. But during the presentation, we will highlight some of the major financial, fiscal, and economic measures taken by the public sector, specifically the Ministry of Finance jointly with the Bank of Thailand, the Department of Business Development, or DBD, the Revenue Department, and the Customs Department. And we will also, at the end of this presentation, give a few takeaways from the private sector's standpoint. So we start our presentation with joint emergency decrees taken by the Ministry of Finance with the Bank of Thailand. Specifically, there are measures to create market liquidity. Someone of you was mentioning that the companies are now in dire circumstances because of lack of market liquidity and lack of demand. At the same time, there are also measures to provide relief to taxpayers. And those measures consist of 3 phases, as you can see on the slide. The first issued on March the 10th, the second on March the 24th, and the third one on the 7th of April. I would just like to add that all the information contained in this presentation can be accessed through our website, mahanakornpartners.com/news. Let's start with phase 1 of the government measures, specifically Ministry of Finance, jointly with the Bank of Thailand. So I mentioned that there are 2 types of measures, financial and fiscal measures. Among the financial measures, as you can see on the slide, there is the allocation of 150 billion Thai baht for soft loans to SMEs at very competitive conditions. Specifically, SMEs are entitled to borrow up to 20 million Thai baht each for 2 years at the interest rate of 2% per annum. Furthermore, there is a grace period extension for principal and interest repayment of pre-existing lines of credit. So it's not only on the new loans, but it's also on outstanding loans, provided that the borrower, the obligor, is creditworthy and it has not missed payments. So there's also reduction of interests and extension of amortization plans for those loans. In addition, on the third column, you can see that additionally, besides the issuance of new loans, banks have also been instructed to relax the creditworthiness criteria, which means that they would aim at ensuring more market liquidity and provide more competitive terms and conditions for the general public. And also there are employment support measures with low interest lines of credit up to 30 billion Thai baht. These are for companies that are registered with the Social Security Fund and have contributed to said fund for at least 3 years. So they have to have contributed at least since the start of 2020. Those were the financial measures. Let's now delve into the fiscal measures. So the fiscal measures include a reduction of the withholding tax for income deriving from professional services, for example, legal services or tax advisory services, hire work, awards, rebates, sales promotions, etc. The withholding tax, as you can see on the slide, is reduced to 1.5% from 3% until the 30th of September 2020, so for the first 2 quarters of the year, and to 2% from the 1st of October until the end of the year, until the 31st of December. So this is regardless of where your accounting period starts. And it's also worth mentioning that the only way of filing withholding tax on the 1st of October will be with the e-withholding tax filing system, so online. The second column, you have VAT. So also VAT operators participated in the Good Exporter program. I don't know how many of you are in the export business, but those who are, and they are in the Good Exporter program, will enjoy expedited VAT refunds, which will be granted within 15 days for e-filing system and within 45 days as opposed to 60 for paper filings. Third column, SMEs with taxable income not exceeding 500 million baht with less than 200 employees and registered for tax amnesty can deduct up to 150% of the interest paid on soft loans from the 1st of April throughout the end of December 2020, so all the rest of the year. And last but not least, the fourth column, companies can deduct 300% of the cost of salaries of the employees, provided that their income does not exceed 15,000 Thai baht per month, and provided the company hasn't laid off employees since December 2019. Clearly, this is a measure taken by the government in order to safeguard salaried employees. Okay, speaking of salaried employees, phase 2 of the measures of the Ministry of Finance outlines some measures for employees and self-employed workers on one hand and entrepreneurs on the other hand. So there's two types of measures depending on the category of a taxpayer. On this slide, on slide 9, you can see starting clockwise from our clock's virtual midnight. We have income compensation measures for those affected by the COVID-19, and also both uncollateralized loans for both self-employed workers, which are so-called emergency loans, and collateralized loans for salaried employees, which are called special credit loans. Clearly, that depends on whether or not the part of the salary that is paid to the employee can be used as a collateral for the loan. Additionally, as you can see, there are also low interest loan facility for from the Department of Social Development and Welfare for low income individuals. And there are knowledge enhancement measures. These are for example, training courses to increase professional skills and enhancing the knowledge for those affected by COVID-19. For example, including the creation of a corporate social responsibility program. Then payment of personal income tax will be deferred from the original deadline of 30th of June to the 31st of August 2020. Moreover, the deduction threshold for health insurance premiums will be lifted to 25,000 baht from 15,000 Thai baht, which then, when combined with deductions of life insurance premiums and life-saving deposits, must not exceed 100,000 baht for the fiscal year 2020. And then you have the exemption of personal income tax, which will serve as compensation for specific categories of individual. Those who work in surveillance, investigation, prevention, control, and treatment of patients with COVID-19, and the public health consultants and specialists dealing with the COVID-19 virus. So let's go to measures for entrepreneurs. The original Thai law says entrepreneurs, but this is clearly also for businesses. So on slide 10, you have measures for businesses, particularly SMEs. Clockwise from midnight, SME loans to enhance business liquidity and ease the burden of business expenses for SMEs. These include hospitality, transportation business, tour companies, hotels, and restaurants. I think it's relevant for some of you in the hospitality and restaurant business. Then there's the SME Development Bank, which will issue loans up to 10 billion baht. That adds up to the phase 1 loans. So there will be 3 million baht loan credit ceilings and interest rate of 3% for the first 2 years. The maximum loan term in this case will not exceed 5 years. Credit applications are accepted now until the 30th of December, so throughout the year. Then again, you can see that the payment of corporate income tax for private companies will be postponed for the fiscal year 2019. The form is called Pongodo and PND 50. The deadlines for tax payment submission are extended to the 31st of August 2020, and for the fiscal year 2020, which is PND 51, the tax deadlines are for payment and also submission of the taxes are extended to the 3rd September. Let's remind everyone that they would have been due between July and the 29th of September. Also, the Revenue Department will allow entrepreneurs in the oil industry, I'm not sure if that is concerning any of you, to submit their tax returns within a 15th day of the following month. I was in a Bloomberg webinar today, and it was specifically about the oil industry. So in that case, if there is a trade that happens in any specific month, the tax returns would have to be submitted on the 15th day of the following month in which the goods have been removed by either an industrial facility or a bonded warehouse. And this is until June 2020. There might be further measures after that. Also for the entertainment business, the Revenue Department has extended the time for filing and payment of tax returns until the 15th of July 2020. So if you have any doubts as to whether your business is affected, you can let us know. Our tax department is going to be assisting with that. Also, there's an exemption of import duty, and later on we will see what the customs have contributed to that. But for the tax, from the tax standpoint, there is exemption of import duty on items used for treatment, diagnosis, or prevention of the coronavirus infection. This exemption will be effective from the date of the announcement until the 30th of September 2020. Also, the tax exemptions for income obtained from debt remission, which is the last point, and or for the proceeds of transfer of assets, sales of goods, provision of services due to debt restructuring, and or from the transfer of properties encumbered by mortgages, and or relief of writing off bad debts from accounts receivable. This affects pretty much everyone. There is also a reduction of registration fees for rights and juristic acts on transfers and mortgages for real estate. So those are measures that benefit any SMEs regardless of their industry. Let's go to phase 3 now. Phase 3 of the measures includes 3 initiatives. As you can see on the slide, we have improvement and rehabilitation of the economy by issuing a line of credit up to 1 trillion Thai baht, of which 600 billion baht for cash handouts and 400 billion baht allocated to economy recovery measures. On the central column, you have measures for economic and financial stability, specifically the issuance of soft loans, which some of you mentioned earlier, up to 500 billion baht. And SMEs that wish to apply must not be in international markets, or only businesses dealing with domestic sales, and they must not have any non-performing loans as of the 31st of December 2019. So what happens? The SMEs will receive additional credit not exceeding 20% of the original loan amount, up to maximum 100 million Thai baht, with the original amount not exceeding 500 million Thai baht. The interest rate will not exceed 2%, and this is negotiable per annum. Additionally, also credit-worthy debtors. What credit-worthy means is the companies are not defaulting, they don't have any outstanding liability, any delinquent accounts with any banks in Thailand. They will enjoy a 6-month grace period on principal and interest payments for both the new loan as well as the pre-existing loan. And also there will be the establishment, as you see on the slide, of the Corporate Bond Stabilization Fund, which is also called BSF. So essentially, the Bank of Thailand will buy and sell investment units in said fund in order to promote market functioning. So the funds will basically buy bonds to help increase the liquidity of high quality companies, which may have experienced liquidity shortage due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The companies can also roll over shares, so there will be no taxes on that. And the Bank of Thailand can buy investment units of the fund not exceeding 400 billion Thai baht. In addition, if the circumstances become worse in the future, the Bank of Thailand will also be able to buy and sell private equities in the secondary market. So those companies that are in this situation may apply for a private equity opportunity. So this is to maintain stability of the private equities and financial system in Thailand. And then you see the third and last column, other 8 measures, which include a 1-year extension of deposit protection for deposits not exceeding 5 million Thai baht to August the 10th, 2021. Let's remember that the former deadline was August the 10th, 2020. Also, low interest credit measures for non-financial business operators, so non-bank, and temporary interbank lending rate cuts to 0.23% per annum from 0.46% per annum, so that financial institutions are will incur lower costs and will be able to lend to each other with a reduction of interest rates, thus helping alleviate the burden on companies and individuals. Let's see now these slides. It gives you an overview of the three measures and what they have brought to the table. So you can see that there's been over 2 trillion Thai baht allocated to lines of credit, most of which was deliberated on phase 3. So these are the major financial measures. There may be more, but I think that this is already substantial. I know that every one of you is in Thailand, and this is for anyone who might be connected from overseas. 2 trillion Thai baht is a corresponding amount exceeding 60 billion of US dollars. Now we've seen financial, economic, and fiscal measures. Let's now have a look at the measures of the Department of Business Development, which you may know as DBD, for the adjustment of compliance rules in response to the COVID-19. So we were unable to have the board meeting of the Thai-Italian Chamber of Commerce this year due to the coronavirus. Here's what the government has said. So it's common knowledge that the Ministry of Public Health classified the COVID-19 as a dangerous communicable disease that falls within the purview of the 2015 Communicable Disease Act. So businesses are asked to refrain from organizing activities that can create a high risk for the spread of the disease, such as the holding of statutory meetings. This affects both private companies, public companies, trade associations, and chambers of commerce. So companies are unable to arrange annual general meetings, which must be delayed. But then whenever they hold the meeting in 2020, after the meeting has been conducted, they must prepare a clarification letter stating why the meeting could not be held or why it was delayed. As you see on the slide, there's differences between private companies and public limited companies, which should submit a clarification letter along with the book of shareholders. Trade associations and chambers of commerce should submit a clarification letter along with the balance sheet. And here on the table 1, you can see the channels for submitting the clarification letter. So it's either the website, which is recommended, walk-in, or the post office at the address which is indicated on the slide. Those slides I think will be shared, so you have all the information that you require. And here you have table 2, where you can see on the left-hand side the customary timelines, normal timelines. And on the right-hand side, the special timelines in response to the COVID-19. So normally, both private and public limited companies must hold a shareholder meeting within 4 months of the end of the accounting period. So for example, if your accounting period ends on the 31st of December, you have 4 months until the end of April. Now, after the temporary measures were issued, there is no time frame, but both private companies and public companies must submit a clarification letter. For trade associations and chambers of commerce, it's 120 days, and also for them, there's no time frame at the moment. Okay, so this is for financial statements. The filing and payment of taxes is postponed as per this slide. You can see that withholding tax, hold on a second. Sorry, financial statements. So if companies, regardless of the type of the companies, are unable to submit financial statements to the DBD within 5 months from the end of the accounting period, and have an accounting period ending from the 31st of October 2019, to the 31st of March 2020, the financial statements can be submitted within the 31st of August 2020. So there is no need in this case for clarification letter. Then the Revenue Department also has issued measures which were recently published for the granting of extension of the filing deadline of tax returns. As I was mentioning earlier, the Revenue Department has postponed withholding tax, which is extended to May the 15th, 2020. And then for VAT, you have to distinguish between domestic invoices and invoices received by business operators overseas. VAT on domestic invoices, which is the Form 30, is now extended to May the 23rd, whereas VAT on invoices from overseas operators, which is the Form 36, is now extended to May 15th, 2020. Then the special business tax, which is the form number 40, is now extended to May the 23rd, just like domestic VAT. And this relief does not include profits deriving from the sale of real estate. So for real estate, is the normal deadlines apply. And then for stamp duty, which is Form 4, 4A, or 4B, this is now extended to the 15th of May. And more reliefs and measures taken by another government agency, namely the customs. So the customs has announced, and we published an article about that, a temporary allowance for of Form E photocopies for customs clearance due to the coronavirus outbreak. Let's define it. So due to the coronavirus outbreak, importers face challenges regarding the Form E, which is the certificate of origin issued under the ASEAN-China Free Trade Agreement, in short ACFT, for customs clearance in Thailand. So as you can see on the slide now, importers, instead of submitting the original, can submit a photocopy of the form. The procedure for submission is the following. As you can see, the importer must request the use of photocopy in the remarks box. And here you have the Thai wording of the request. They must also request a meeting with a customs officer with the online system. And then prior to retrieving the goods, the importer must submit the request form for verification by the customs department. So the verification must take place. And then within 30 days of custom clearance of the goods, the importer is then required to submit the original version of Form E to the customs department. So a photocopy can be presented, but then the original must also be submitted. So if the submission within the prescribed period is not made, then the duty exemptions and preferential tariffs rates do not apply. Okay, so now we have given an overview of a few of the financial, fiscal, and compliance measures the government has taken in response to the COVID-19. We want to give some takeaways from this. We can derive a few, I think, takeaways that from the way that both the private and the public sectors have been managing the risks and impacts of COVID-19. Let's take a look. So we see that alongside governments, also private businesses are doing their utmost to stay abreast of the coronavirus pandemics. On the public sector side, we see that governments are enforcing strict measures such as social distancing, travel restrictions, and quarantine. On the private sector side, a key word you hear currently these days is business continuity. So how do we ensure business continuity post-COVID-19? Certainly businesses across industries have had to rethink the business models adjust to change and innovate in order to stay relevant. And for some businesses, a business continuity plan may imply a change in their processes and a change in their workflows. I'll give you an example of our firm. So MPG is in the professional services industry. And for all departments, we had to implement an efficient and reliable teleworking infrastructure. So I'm working from home today, and so do most of our staffs, with a few exceptions. So this was a paradigm shift for us. We had to rethink our Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 business model, even though it's more 9 to 9 for us, in shift into telecommuting. So for example, it was a great effort to migrate 100% of our accounting department to a cloud-based system. Consider that we have accounting documents for clients that have been with us for over 20 years, and we rent a separate 5-story building just for the safekeeping of those documents. We have 2 big server rooms in our headquarters, which our accountants and auditors need to be able to access at all times. So we were forced to cope with the change, and we had to do it quickly. A rather noticeable change you can see on the slide was that our cloud-based accounting service offerings have increased by 74% in the first quarter of 2020. It's clearly mostly in the past month as a result of the migration. So even clients were initially reluctant to change the accounting method, agreed to cloud-based solutions because it's more reliable, it's faster, and it's safer. So what are the advantages? Because we understand it was a big investment for us. It was a big challenge. It took a lot of time and resources to do so, but there were also advantages of migrating our accounting system to a cloud platform. We were using it before, partially, but now it's widespread across thousands of accounts. Okay, so for starters, our cloud-based accounting allows our clients to share and access information real time. With our accounting department, with single individuals, with single accountants, auditors, consultants, admin people in real time. So nowadays with tablets, smartphones, laptops, PCs, like we're doing today on this conf call, on this webinar, information can be accessed anytime and anywhere. So this was a big turnover for us, turning point. And another change we have experienced was in our banking and finance division. So in the past, we would mostly work on large-scale capital projects or trade finance transactions, whereas now we have several inquiries from companies who need liquidity, and thanks to the government's financial measures as well, this is possible. So our current digital infrastructure allows us to have real-time access to clients' credit facilities, and we're still able to monitor progress of loan applications for projects, working capital, acquisitions, or import transactions, for example. Also, legal services were affected, as you all know. So in an effort to curb the spread of the virus, all trials are adjourned with a few exceptions. So we have a few pending criminal defense cases that are still current. Other litigation or other non-relevant, non-important at this stage for the government cases cannot be conducted. So lawyers are currently unable to represent clients in tribunals. However, thanks to video conferencing, we're still able to give legal advice to our clients. There are also legal updates concerning the performance of contractual obligations. For example, contract enforceability amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. Speaking of contracts, now it's particularly difficult to meet in person and sign contracts. However, in many instances, it is still possible to have legally enforceable contracts that are digitally signed. We're going to have a webinar with the ICC later on this Friday, and they're going to illustrate how the changes have the changes have affected contractual obligations. Speaking of contracts, Also, the government is being a bit more relaxed in terms of accepting photocopies at this stage, but clearly all the wet ink signed contracts need to be presented at a later stage. We still do, in fact, we do incorporations, including BOI and foreign business licenses, enjoying somewhat relaxed compliance rules. And as I mentioned earlier, the ICC rules for trade finance transactions have been amended to take into account new market conditions. For example, the COVID-19 as force majeure and how it affects the enforceability of contracts. So we are at the last slide, and so we have more time for Q&A. We'll now try and wrap up the webinar with a pinch of common sense. You know, we hear every day that companies may find time management difficult during the pandemic. It's true that working from home reduces the time spent commuting, but it's disruptive in terms of teamwork. So it's indispensable to remain engaged, have frequent communication with teammates, monitor activities constantly, and keep communication as usual. Also, research and innovation are crucial for companies. They need to rethink the business model and the strategy. Companies need to stay goal-oriented. This doesn't necessarily mean that companies need to achieve the exact same pre-pandemic goals, but it implies a reassessment of the company's objectives and its strategies to obtain them. And then clearly, last but not least, workplace, whether an office or a home like today, must have an efficient digital infrastructure, so including fast, reliable internet access to ensure a business continuity plan. So thank you all very much for your attention. This is all from MPG for today. On this slide, you have our contact details. Feel free to contact us at any time.